So I, so I guess firstly, everyone, this is Dr. Robin Hadley, a British academic. so, so we're hoping that our discussion here covers every gamut. We've got the academic and we've got the bloke. So, and Robin will be full of British politeness, and I will be full of brash Australianness.
Oh, brilliant.
So, so firstly, Robin, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you've been up to, and what you're going to be up to perhaps next month.
Okay, right. Yeah, I'm Robin Hadley. I'm a doctor of social gerontology, which means a study of aging, and I'm an involuntary childless man. And my PhD was about older involuntary childless men. And in fact, I worked for 30 years as a technician. I left school with very few qualifications. I'm a working class man from Manchester in the UK, and I was very broody in my 30s. In my 40s, I changed career and I started counselling. And for my master's in counselling, I decided to look at what broodiness for men meant, and was I the only man who, in their 30s, was so desperate to be a dad but didn't become one. And that's when I found out there's really nothing about men and their desire for fatherhood in terms of feeling. So there's not many stories around men. If you look in the media, a lot of it's around women, not so much around men at all. This event today is really quite groundbreaking, and it's going to make a big impact around the world, that we're going to speak about our stories and what's happened to us. And then after my MA, I did an MSc looking at levels of broodiness between men and women, because it's assumed that women are broody and men aren't bothered, and that's a myth that's still perpetuated, carries on today. I struggle with it sometimes, and actually I find out it's around about the same. And if you think about it, in any species, it'd be strange if one half of the species wanted to reproduce and the other one wasn't bothered. That species wouldn't really survive that long on that sort of reproductive strategy, and it certainly wouldn't have aircrafts wouldn't have been doing this sort of communication we've got today. And then I got funding for my PhD looking at the older childless men and what that means being childless as an older person, because you know, I like a lot of you guys, I suspect, I just assumed I'd be a dad. It's like falling off a cliff, isn't it? It's just what happens. I was going to leave school, get a job, find a woman, get married and have children. And I was on track until the last bit. And that goes for a lot of people, but that separating from the track I thought I was going to be on to another track, that track lasts all our lives. And that's how we're viewed and how we view ourselves. It's always a narrative we occupy. So, and you asked me what I'm going to do. Next month I'm going to Japan, talking at a Japanese sociological society conference about being, about older involuntary childless men who wanted to be dads and for a whole range of reasons didn't become them. Because it's not just biological, there's a whole raft of circumstances that come into not being a father. Mine was timing of my divorce at 30, when I thought we were going to be having kids. The length of time it then took to form another relationship. So I was in my mid-30s, that relationship breaking up. Again, when we're talking about having children, and then forming a relationship with somebody who didn't want to risk having a child in her mid-40s. So there's all sorts of things come in to being involuntary childless for men and for women as well.
Yeah, and that's what hopefully, like I said, we've covered the whole gamut. I am a 50-year-old, well, hang on, 51-year-old man. And I've been with my wife since we were children. We were 16 when we first met. And like you, Robin, that's it. It's, you know, get married, have children, have the house, the white picket fence, you know, nice American sitcom life. And it doesn't happen, you know, and so, you know, it was more a medical side for us. My wife has polycystic ovaries, and through our journey, we found that I had low sperm mobility, so we had a bit of a double whammy. And so our experience has been through the whole fertility treatment journey. Sorry to use the cliche, but that's the only thing that comes to mind right now. And so we like to think that we survived it. We've got to the other side, and we're in a pretty good place. Not to say that it's not difficult, but and so we thought, you know, from our way of thinking, that if we share our experience and what we've been through, then we can help others. We can help others. And then once we got into this field and into this community, you find out there is nothing for us guys. You know, and I will, if I can just steal the show for a minute. What happened to us was that, you know, I was being this strong, masculine rock guy that, you know, my wife could depend on, and then I fell in the heap, and I had depression, and some people called it a midlife crisis, but what it was that I was burnt out, absolutely burnt out, and there was nothing for me. And there was, where do I go? Where do I go? So my wish is that we can somehow get this male voice heard, because there are lots of our, should we say, our brothers around the world that, you know, that need support. And I think I mentioned to you before that talking to a young girl in London just recently, she said to my wife and I, how do I do it? How do I cope? How do I get to this acceptance that I'm not going to have children? What tools are there? You know, and you have, you know, there is quite a bit for females, you know, to grasp hold of, be part of, but there is nothing for us. You know, and I'll be very interested to hear from our audience of how they feel about that as well. You know, and you know, it will be actually, Robin, from your point of view, because you're in this academically more than I. And in a different, because I can tell you now, in Australia, there's nothing. Australia is the wild frontier. If you don't handle things like Steve Irwin or Crocodile Dundee,
right?
Yeah, you're not a man.
Yeah,
but yeah. So, is there in the UK? Is this a very similar, you know, experience, you know, from the people that you've talked to?
Yeah, it is. They all sort of say, where do I go? Very typically, if they've been through infertility treatment, the men see themselves as the rock. And all this experience is happening around their partner, and that's what their role is. I've got to be stable and strong because there's chaos all around. It's a wild sea of emotion and experience. It's a rock, but also a volcano, because we socialize generally, and it goes across lots of cultures, to not express ourselves from a very, very young age. Not to keep everything in, not express emotions, don't be weak, don't let yourself be vulnerable, and don't leave yourself open for humiliation. And I think that's a sort of a key word in that. And how we negotiate that when something happens, like infertility, and we don't become a father and we're off track, particularly compared to all the media that's around. Every advert almost on the television features a family, and it's reminding you of what you're not and what you feel you should be. So no, really, there's not that much in the UK. I mean, we'd say counselling. If you go for infertility treatment, counselling's offered. Quite often, there's a couple of counselling sessions thrown in with it. After that, you have to pay. And from the men I've spoken to, they found the counselling was good for their partners, but not so good for them. And also throughout the IVF treatment, a lot of men feel isolated from it and excluded from it. The partner builds relationships with the various medical people there, and the man's only there for one thing. And also everybody knows what that man's there for. And is that not pointing you on that thing of being humiliated and vulnerable when everybody knows that you're going to do that very private thing?
Funny you say that. This is where the Aussie brashness is probably going to come to the fore now.
Yeah.
But I have a belief that your masculinity is challenged greatly by a number of different things that you have to go through.
Mm.
I was only just talking to my wife today about, when, not quite sure what happens in the UK, but in Australia you have to follow a certain path. So you realise you need help for getting preggers. So the first thing they do is they check you both out, make sure my sperm's okay, her eggs are all right. Okay, so then, okay, well, that seems okay. Well, yeah, it's a bit iffy. So the next thing you do is, regimented, looking at the fertility cycle. You must have sex on this particular day. But yeah, so what it did for me was I had to go to my boss at work and say, look, I've got to come in late tomorrow. Why? Well, I can't say this any other way, but I've got a wank in a test tube and I've got to do that at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And where I worked was a very, very male dominated. It was a steelwork. So it was, in terms of a sort of politically correct workplace, not a chance at the time. So my boss is looking at me going, you got to do what? And then I'd have to explain.
Yeah.
Then we got to that point where, you have to have sex on this particular day at this particular time. You have to go to your boss again. I've got to go home. Why? I've got to go and shag the missus. What? And it's these episodes, that whittle away at you. You've got to take samples in, to have them tested. And the woman behind the counter is questioning you in front of, half a dozen women sitting there going, so Mr. Hughes, how was this collected? When was this collected? Is there any saliva in this sample? So, whoa, hang on. Oh, I've snuck it in a little sock and now you're telling everyone? So I totally understand where you come from in terms of, and we feel isolated because, like I said, that's all we've got to do. Yeah. And sometimes, it ain't the easy bit.
No, it isn't the easy bit. And also there's the relationship as well. It puts an awful lot of strain on your relationship. A lot of people break up during treatment or post-treatment. Some couples bonds them, that they've been through it and now their life has changed and that becomes a bonding thing. And so some couples say their relationships get stronger. But one of the things we have to negotiate is that sense of loss and bereavement of a life that we should have lived and thought we would live. And how do we do that? Particularly, I think in Western societies, don't deal with death particularly well. now, and it is a form of death and bereavement, and we don't really talk about it. And talking and knowing how to listen is some of the ways of dealing with this and acknowledging it. I think for men, it's a lot of it is keeping it inside, and that builds up a pressure. Particularly as I think we're socialized as men, how are we validated is outside ourselves. So by our jobs, what we do. And one of the critical things in all societies, you get status by reproduction, by being a parent. And if you're not that, what are you? And for men, if I'm not a parent and you get made redundant, so I'm not an earner, men tend not to socialize that much outside work, particularly, certainly not a deep emotional way. So I've lost that connection where I can go and have a few beers and shoot the breeze about stuff outside of myself, football, cricket, whatever, stamp collecting, but not the deep stuff inside.
Yeah, and that's very, very true. You know, I'm not averse to speaking like that, but I know that the men around me shiver in their boots if I start talking this way, because they don't know how to deal with it, how to respond, how to, you know, do other men comfort each other? You know, there's that sort
Absolutely. How do I comfort you? As a man, I'm sort of trained to be goal oriented. I resolve things. I go out and I get the bacon. I do this in a way we reflect sperm. Sperm's the only cell that can last for any length of time outside the body. So it lasts for about 5 to 8 hours, something like that, as a capable unit. And that's what we do. So our sperm exists outside our body. We exist outside our body socially, and how we gain status. And if we
I'm not sure how to help.
Oh, sorry, that was my Google Home. I better turn that off.
Oh, right. Well, and actually, that's really significant. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to help. With men, they're not sure how to help.
We won't edit that out.
How do I resolve his problem? Well, I can't. And I'm stuck. Not only can I not actually go and buy something apart from another beer or something, I can't do anything. I don't have the words and I don't know how to listen.
Yep.
And the big thing about listening is actually you don't have to resolve it. You just have to hear that somebody's hurting.
Yeah, and that's very true. Very true. It's been an interesting experience gathering some data for this. I've got some data from a survey done by Stephanie Phillips, and some of the statements in here I'm going to read out, which are really, really interesting. You know, sometimes it makes you feel worthless. Other men ask you, "Isn't it about time you had kids? You don't have to have Christmas off as holidays because you don't have any children." You know, and again, it makes you feel like you don't fit in. You know, and it's interesting to see that they're very, very common statements that I know females have also, you know, have given us. There's a really good one here. You know, the feeling of awkwardness when you're the only one in a group of friends that doesn't have children. You know, when they're sharing stories about their kids, their wives, and pregnant. You know, and it just goes on about, really, the whole theme of it is about that isolation that we get. You know, and it can be self-imposed, or it can be just the way that we perceive others' behaviour, just like you were saying. You know.
Yeah, it did. Yes, socially, it is difficult if you don't have kids, and as you get older, what can happen is your peers have children, and they drift away. Children become the center of their lives. And if they try and include you, it's come round, you come to us. We won't come to you because, well, your accommodation is not child friendly. So it's all driven that way. And those children then impact on their social lives because they're going to classes and sports and whatever. So all that happens. Then the kids go off to uni or they get married, and their parents come back into your life later on. And so you reconnect. But then their kids have grandkids. And then there's another element of the conversation that you're excluded from. On Facebook, for example, posting things up there, just almost constant reminders of a life that could have been or should have been.
Yep.
And how do you deal that? I mean, do you just cut them off? It is difficult. There are more groups for women about support and how they support each other, and there is a need for men, for a group for men. But I think it would have to be a group that's designed for men by men.
Yes.
And for me, I think if that group was to be formed, then I think you'd have to appreciate what tends to happen with men on, I'm going to go to medical bulletin boards. So a man gets diagnosed with something, and he goes to the medical bulletin board, and it's anonymous, and he shares his feelings on there because it's anonymous and nobody can see him or see it's him. Then he gets cured, something is resolved, and then he moves off the bulletin board because that's resolved. And I think that is, if there's a men's group about being involuntary childless, there's going to be a high tidal flow of men coming in, sharing, and then moving on.
Yeah.
I think that is what's going to happen. For me, one of my, I think, reasons why I'm childless is I was terribly shy when I was young. I come from a big family. I'm at the bottom. I'm the 7th of 8. And when you're in that sort of structure, everything's analysed that you're doing, held up for humiliation, examination by your older brothers and sisters, who are lovely. I love them all. But there's many nuances to all relationships. And I was very, very shy. So I lost my virginity in my early 20s, which is years behind everybody else, apparently. But that was down to actually being very nervous about making approach and fear of rejection. That fear of rejection is a safer not to put myself in that vulnerable spot and be humiliated. So rejection, vulnerability, humiliation are the sort of core things for me. And that took me a long time to get over. So I got married at 26 and started married at 28. So sort of on time, but a bit late compared to my peers. Breaking up at 30 was critical because that's the time when everybody started having kids. And it still is an issue for me. How do you make a deep relationship with someone? And I think if you look at the stats, women tend to have more friends for longer over the life course than men. Men tend to have 1 or 2 good friends. Women have more. And later on in life, that becomes very important, particularly if you don't have kids, because who's going to look after you if you're ill? Who's going to, not particularly look after you, but negotiate with informal care, getting a bit of shopping in or whatever?
Well, it's funny
an adult children would do. Sorry.
No, it's funny you say that. I think we've discussed this before where like I'm now caring for my parents, not on a high level right now, but it's made me think, who's going to do this for us? Who's going to care for me? There's a high chance that I could get one of the ailments that my parents have got: dementia, Parkinson's disease, Meniere's. There's a few there. So there's a high chance. And who's going to look after me? My mother says, "Oh, but you've got your brother. But what if I outlive my brother, Mum? Then who's going to be there for me, you know? And it's actually it's my, you know, we've got over our childlessness and we've accepted that. And now it's this next burden, if you will, is who is going to look after me when I'm frail and my wife's frail, you know, and one of us passes, and it becomes, it's a real concern. And I don't think that society's geared up for this either.
Yeah, I agree with you. And while we're talking about society, how actually society views men and men who don't have children. Certainly, all the men I spoke to in my PhD had a fear of being seen a paedophile in social settings. So I live on a small street, and there's kids on the street, and you can tell when somebody's having a party because all the kids are trotting down the road with the parents behind them with bags and stuff. And we don't get invited. We don't get invited because we don't have kids. So there's a whole social element out there. And I love hearing the kids play. It reminds me of my own childhood in the happy bits. That's great. And certainly in the summer, the kids were playing riding, and one of the kids fell off the bike, and I was doing something in the front garden. My instinct was to go and sort of comfort that kid because they were crying. It's about a 7-year-old girl. There were other children around. Actually, I can't do that because I'm an older man. I'm 58. That I would be seen as predatory.
Yep, that's true. And I'm just looking at some of the comments on the chat that from Kenny Smith. He's you are certainly resonating with him as well.
Yeah.
And it is such a shame.
It is. I think again for men, how we talk to each other, there is a cultural element. So you're very Oz out there. I'm British, so a bit reserved, but underneath we have the same experience.
Yes.
And we share that. Sometimes I think for women who are childless, there's a whole range of narratives going from there's a pity range to actually you're selfish because you've just thought of yourself, you've just got a career. For men, it's not, and there's a whole range for those between those two that women get stuff thrown at them. For men, it's not like that. I don't think out there. There's not a narrative for us to occupy, and which is one of the great things about World Childless Week and what we're doing is we're putting a narrative out there for men to actually say you're not alone, and we can do something about it. How we do it and what we do.
Well, it's early days. We're blazing the trail, so it's early days right now.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how this evolves next year, as an example, or how it evolves from now to next year. I think for me, it'll be a time, once we've finished this chat, it will be a time of reflection and think about, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
But, I'd like to think that it's not, that we don't lose contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
But look, how about we've done a fair bit of talking.
We have.
We've got an hour and we're nearly 40 minutes in. So, are there events, Kenny, Joe, Justin, Simon? Hang on. Oh no, you're at the end. Is there any questions for us right now?
I can see Simon's written, where have you found support? And that's a great question, Simon. Thanks for that. It's a difficult one. I mean, you can go to counselling and find some support there. I think in the UK, there's a thing called the Infertility Network, and they have a branch called More to Life, which is for people who are out of the infertility treatment and it wasn't successful. And they have groups, and there's certainly a men's section to that to join. So that might be worth looking up. But I think actually in the UK we're quite ahead of the game here in that sort of element.
Well, look, I can tell you down here on the other side of the world, in the wild frontier, it's I've found nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. There are Facebook pages that I'm, Facebook groups that I'm part of, like the Path to Acceptance, which has been great for me.
Yeah.
But it's also been great for my wife and I, because we both are part of that. If because I know this will be played in World Childless Week, so obviously we're not just talking to the audience we've got now.
No.
But one of the things that I'd advocate, and I know this is what you used to do, Robin, is counselling.
Yeah.
My wife and I went for a good 10 years to counselling for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it was for my wife, because she had to experience some, and I can speak openly, this is not a problem. I have a permission. She had some quite harrowing experiences as a child, which left her, emotionally scarred, and still does now. And originally it was just for that, but then, we were trying to have kids at the same time, and it wasn't working, and then I found myself immersed in this, cycle in counselling, and it was the best thing I ever did. It helped me communicate with my wife, and it helped us understand each other.
Mm.
The way that I can explain it, the best way to explain it is it's like an interpreter.
Mm.
That a person that mediates in the middle and actually interprets each of you, and so you can come to an understanding. And now we've, we like to think that we can talk about anything, because we understand the value of that communication. But from a support point of view for us, that's it, and that's why I'm pleased to be part of World Childless Week, and pleased to be a World Childless champion, because I want to get our voices out there.
Yeah, and similar. Sorry, after you.
Get some groundswell to get our brothers looked after, if you will.
Yeah, and that's similar. I'm a World Childless Week champion, and again, from my research, but I talked to a lot of men about their not being a dad, and it seemed I could have just written papers and done the academic thing, but actually somebody has to stand up and put their head above the parapet and be willing to do that. And I'm willing to do that, because I feel if we do get that information out there into the press and on the social media, there's men out there who will see it and go, okay, I'm not like him, but I am like this. And it gives them something to bounce across against, and actually find a narrative and a part of their identity that they can then express. So somebody's asked, how do we manage, I think, to tell people about being childless? Well, I've got a bit of an advantage, because it's my research. And so when somebody asks you about your research, then pity them, because I'd say something like, I don't have kids, and that's why I'm really interested in people who don't have children, particularly men, and what that impact is. And you know what? People say, I've never thought about men not becoming dads, but it's obvious. It's so obvious, it was hidden in plain sight. Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But it's, I think counselling is great, because it does help you find out actually how to express yourself.
Yeah.
And how to express yourself so that expression is relatively easy for other people to understand, and for men in particular not have to do anything about it.
Most definitely. Yeah, the way, as I said, the way that I sort of view it is that, you know, my wife learned how to interpret a male's behaviour, and I learned how to interpret a female's behaviour. And you know, and so it kept us intact. It kept us, you know, a couple. It kept my identity. It kept her identity, and we were able to then just understand each other. And that's the way that I would explain it to someone if they ever said, "Oh, you know, should I do it? Should I not?"
I think also expression is really good for men, because we're sort of trained not to be very verbal and not to be easy with words. We're socialized in that way. We do actions, we do things. How do you know me? By what I do. Don't listen to what I say, see what I do. I follow my actions. And you can divert that if your actions become something like art or poetry or writing. So I like to think, you know, like Shakespeare, great writer, he was hopefully, I like to think, a bumbling idiot when it comes to being social, and a bit like me when I was younger and trying to court women. But actually, he could write. People do poetry, people do painting, they do gardening. So there's ways of releasing the volcano, the energy of the volcano from that rock,
Yeah.
so that you're not carrying that all the time.
Yes. No. I'm sorry. I was with you. Someone just asked a question. How would you how do you want us to contribute to the conversation via video or just via the chat? And I've just said, look, you can turn on your video or you can type a question in. So the choice is theirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So where were we? There is a question. I'm not, and it would be good to throw it out to the audience as well. There's a lady's asked me once before. She's single, you know, and she said, "How do I tell a guy that I can't have children? When do I do that?" And I'd be interested to hear from the audience if they've got any you know, any thoughts on that. I'll be interested to hear yours, Robin. I'll speak first and say that is tough. You know, because as a guy, you take a girl out, and you know, in the first meeting, she says, you know, "Oh, look, I'm sorry, I need to tell you I can't have children," and you'd be like, whoa, hang on, stop the bus. You know, you're talking to me now about having children already. I understand this woman's point of view, but but at the same time, again, it was a question that was asked, and I promised I'd try and get it out there, and it's a tough thing.
And I guess it goes for men and women. If you know that you're infertile and you want to date someone as a man, the same thing goes. When do you say this? Or maybe you just it rather depends. Personally, I always seem to think men want to be fit in with women.
Yeah.
So I just see how that conversation was going, and if it starts to get serious, then at the time of, are we going to spend our futures together? What are you doing in the future?
Yeah.
And maybe that might be one way to do it. You know, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Yeah. Yeah.
That might be a thing, and people will say leader of a company or rich on an island or whatever. But some people will say, you know, I expect to be certainly, I guess if I was asked that at 21, I expect I'll be having children. I'll be a dad at some point in the future. Yeah, so that
Well,
might be one way. So yeah, you're reading.
just reading some more chats here.
Yeah.
Running groups and being part of a visible group has helped my wife to come to terms with this. Has been champion for World Childless Week helped you? I would say for me, yes, it has. You know, being chosen to be a champion has actually has been good for me. My wife is as pleased as punch. She's a very very supportive wife, but she's very shy. And so she sort of vicariously lives through me, you know, and in that respect.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm very proud, and I look forward to where being a champion takes me.
And yeah, what Michael said. You've hugged all that narrative. Well done.
All right, no
There's
problem.
nowhere to go. No, it's great. It's an honour to be asked and be accepted as a World Childless Week champion. Anything that spreads the word that it's all right to be a man and not to be a dad. You're as valid as anyone.
Yep, exactly.
And your journey is just different. We all travel down roads, but our point of origin and our destinations are different. And our journey, although we're sharing the same space, is different, but it's equally as valid as anybody else's journey.
Most definitely, most definitely. One of the other themes that has come through some of the questions I've been canvassing people about is it's a fairly long-winded question, but it goes around how women have this belief that, and I'm generalizing, of course, but women have this belief that men find fertile women more attractive.
Okay.
I think it stems from some deep-seated insecurities, obviously, that, you know, a woman would feel less of a woman because she can't have a child. And then does that, do we as men sense that? Is that something that we use as to gauge the attractiveness of a woman?
Oh gosh.
I can say for myself, I can say, well, no, and my life with my wife is that, you know, is. But from a sort of an academic point of view, have you come across anything like that in the research that you've done?
The only thing, well, not the only thing, I can say an awful lot, but what I'm going to say is the men I spoke to said the most important thing was having a relationship. Having a child was like the next step, the cherry on the cake, that sort of thing. One or two of the guys said actually it was more important for me to become a dad than actually the relationship. The relationship was the means to the end.
Yeah.
I never got to the end, and that was a sadness. So there is that range, but for most of the men, an adult, safe, supportive relationship was the priority. And then, as I said, the cherry on the cake would be having kids. It was the next step. I think there's a parallel process between the genders on that do women pick men who've already reproduced, women who don't have children? It is that sort of element to it, or sometimes women who produce children then have an affair or hook up with a man who's already got children, and they produce some more between them. So there's that element. So I think it cuts across both sexes and gender. I just want to bring gender in here because we're being very heterosexual, but obviously gay men want to be dads as well. And what happens there, and in the LGBT community, how are they seen? It's changing a lot in that community, but not as a gay man. I don't feel I can say too much about it, but I just acknowledge that there's a whole broad spread of cultures and genders that might be listening and viewing this, and I want to be inclusive of those, the whole gamut of peoples. So we just acknowledging that it's an issue across all societies and all genders.
Yeah. Look, I totally agree with you, Robin. And my apologies if I have come across as a bit too heterosexual.
No.
But like you, I'd like to acknowledge that it does go across, all gamuts of society. It's just that this is the only one I've got experience with.
Yeah, absolutely, and the same here, But it's an inclusive group. That if you're from a different part of the world with very strict cultural boundaries and guidance, you've got to be doing this, you've got to be doing that, that being childless is seen as lesser, and you'll be, as a man or a woman, and you'll be physically discriminated against as well as socially. And I think there's something, somebody said something about, I'm going to say about work. And what I found when I was working in a big institution was being childless, when it came to school holidays, you were at the bottom of the pecking order. You were seen as available to cover. And certainly my first wife worked in a bank, and when they did their holidays 12 months in advance for the next year, and if you didn't have children, then you couldn't book school holidays off. So
very true.
There's an institutional, structural discrimination.
Most definitely. There's a question just come up. I feel it hard to open up to other people, as I believe I'm giving them ammunition to use against me.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about that? You go first, Rob.
Oh, phew.
All right, I'll go first. I'll go first.
It's fine. It's fine. Yes, it's true, and I feel the same. It's something how you don't give them ammunition, or if you do, give them blanks, so that you're not going to get hurt. So there's a matter of how you frame it. And actually, what does it say about them that they want to do that?
Well, exactly. Is exactly right. But I have a different take on it.
Good.
This stems from taking some acting lessons back when I was, younger and slimmer, and to get over stage fright. It's going to be a long-winded answer, but anyway, bear with me. To get over stage fright, what you have to do is go out on stage knowing that everyone in that audience is in awe of you, because you've got the strength and the courage to walk out in front of all those people. Once you can get that around in your head and realise that they are like you, they are sitting there going, how can that person do that? You realise that you now have a powerful position. I took that away. And this is why I have no qualms about talking about who I am, that I'm childless, that I cry, because I realise that if I can say these things to someone, then I don't want to sound dominant, but that I'm in a better position, because they have nowhere to go except, wow. And like you say, if that's their intention, there is something wrong with them.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
And it's great that you did acting, and why stop acting? Why not carry that across the life course? But it's great you pick up skills, there's transferable skills that you use from your background and from your work, that maybe there's narratives you use in your work, things you say that you haven't applied to your personal life, that you can. Actually, if this was somebody talking to me at work about spanners, then I'd say this. So why don't I use the same sort of phrasing, just change the technical word for spanners in there. So I'm limited on my English, obviously, because I'm English. Terrible at my own language.
We've got to wrap it up pretty soon. So look, let's see if there's anybody out there's got any more questions.
I think we can go for an extra 10 minutes if you want. That's
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, hang on. We just said something's popped through. So, do you feel stronger and more confident now that you speak openly about being childless?
For me, it depends where I am and who I'm with and what my intention is at being there. So if it's a conference of this, I tend to be more confident because I'm there for a reason and I'm trying to do something. So there's an aim there. If it was a room full of strangers and nothing to do with this area, then well, I'd probably be a bit of a wallflower anyway, and I'd pick my moments. I think it changes, but I think if you can get a script going, so like Michael was saying, actually, I'm an involuntary childless man, and that's made me a bit sad, and it's affected my life. But you know what? I'm okay. Did you see the match the other night? So this is me, and here's the escape route for you, because I know you're probably going to go, oh, or you might go, sod the match. That's really interesting. Tell me more about that. Sorry, I swore then.
I'm quite surprised I haven't swore more. Okay, for me, do I more confident speaking openly about being childless? I pick my conversations. Usually, you usually get when you meet someone new, oh, do you have kids? And I usually say, sadly, no. It's not for the want of trying. And then I'll back that up. And if they're nice, if I find I've got to, if they're worth it, I'll say, well, look, and please don't feel bad about it. We're good about that, and we're quite open to talk about it if that's something you'd like to talk to.
Yeah.
So similar to you, but I'm confident in saying that.
Mm. It's almost like managing other people and their expectations.
Yeah, exactly. I show them a bit of respect by making, because I know that they're going to feel bad. Or some level of guilt, perhaps. So that's unfair to leave that with them, and that's the way I look at it.
And I think if somebody's been, and I think this often happens to women directly. You are being selfish about doing that. What's wrong with you? Very directly to their face. Then that. Being childless is such a challenge for other people sometimes that they can't comprehend it.
Yeah.
They can't comprehend actually not being a parent, whether they're a parent or not. So definitely. I think there's that bit of understanding that actually inside you're struggling to process what you're being told, and it challenges you. And so their response is to block it or push it away. Yeah,
I totally agree. I'm just trying to look through some of the responses here. Justin agrees with you, Robin, about people often choose the ammunition that reflects them, attack you regarding the things that they don't like in themselves. I can see that. Where are we?
If anybody wants to switch, unmute or switch off the video and join in, that's fine. But if you don't want to do that, that's great. You won't be on the recording as a video.
Yeah. So Yeah, no more questions.
Okay.
I'm just looking through my list of questions I had here, but we're up to what, 9:03. Sorry, that's 9:03 p.m. in Australia. So
Right.
we've got about 5-7 minutes left.
Yeah.
I'm just looking through a list of questions. There's a little group in Australia here that I've been canvassing to sort of get some fodder for us. But we've sort of covered most of it, because a lot of theirs was around the insecurity of their husband or their partner leaving them because they couldn't have children. And I think we've talked about that.
Can I just say something here? A lot of women want to know why their men won't talk to them about deep stuff. So particularly if you're going through IVF or struggling with something, the women will say, he doesn't talk. And I think part of that is actually, there's so much going on in me. If I talk as a man, because I've got that plug of concrete there and all this emotional stuff, I'm just around my stomach, I'm doing this, it's all churning away. If I unplug it and you're going through all this, then I might flood you even more.
Yeah. Yep.
So rather being on a rock and an island, we'll both be in that sea churning of emotions. I think for men, it's actually what will I be then?
Yeah.
Where will I be?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for men, that actually it might be doing one of those other things of writing it down to process and say, okay, it's so much in here that I flood the room and I'd be in tears, and you wouldn't know what to do and I wouldn't know what to do. But actually, if you give me a bit of time, I'll write it and then I'll read it out to you, or give it you to read, and then you sort of manage it, and work with how you work best. You know yourself. You're your own expert, although you may not feel it.
It's funny you bring that up, because it's only just the other day that my wife and I are having a conversation. I'm not quite sure if it's age, but I'm finding that that my emotions are surfacing more. My wife thinks it's because it's me now grieving after 10 years since we did our last IVF. She's of the opinion that I'm now starting to grieve and I'm letting it out. And I'm quite surprised I haven't cried tonight. So I don't know what's going on there. An example is yesterday we got a message from someone that we know who said, we're having dinner with my parents actually, and this message came through that I rudely read at the dinner table. It's from a friend of ours who said, look, I hope you don't think this is weird, but because we are so open about what we have been through and what, and who we are, she's gone, you guys are terrific. You guys are strong. You are a great role model, and we'd like to give you an honorary position in our family. And all right, here it comes. Excuse me. But yeah, we'd like to give you an honorary position in our family and hopefully influence our children. And excuse me. I couldn't have done that 10 years ago. But I find now that my emotions are always creeping to the fore. Now, I don't know if that's age. or if it's just that my wife is right, and that, you know, I'm now grieving.
I think there's a lot of things going on there. One of the things is being in, you know, that concrete plug that's placed in us when we're very young as men, that's cracked, and you've got good conduits between the emotional and the outside world, and that's a strong thing to be. Certainly when I give talks, sometimes I get very emotional, and I start to well up and I cry. But I tell the students, you know, it's all right for me to do. This is my grief, and you don't have to do anything about it. It's just an acknowledgement of a feeling, and this is a genuine and human response. And you know, I'll just have these few tears, and then we'll move on. But if you've got an issue, then we because of this, then we can sort that out as well between us. So I think, yes, it is age, but it's also experience. And learning, and acknowledging the self in all its glory, I guess, means acknowledging the non-self as well. So it acknowledges the potential that you are, you were, and could have been. And that's an unconnected thing. Gosh, that's a bit deep, isn't it?
Actually, I quite like the way you use the conduit. I like that. I might have to pinch that off you.
Away, yours.
Oh, look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Robin. It really has.
And you and guys for joining us with your questions and stuff. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure doing this for you all. This video will be shown in World Childless Week, you know, to the world. I should have got a makeup person in. I'm just realising. Look how flushed I look. But anyway, not to worry. Yeah. So look, again, it's been a pleasure, Robin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.